Hey guys, Scott here. Today we're going to be talking about ranked mode in Dead by Daylight and whether or not that would actually be a good idea. Obviously, this has been a very contentious and debated topic in the games community for several years now, probably like 5+ years. There's always been that, subset of people that want to play sweaty, that want a place to do it, and then there's also the casual players that also want that mode to exist, so these sweaty players will go there and leave them the fuck alone. So I understand why both sides could actually want this, but interestingly, I made a poll for this, and it was pretty split down the middle. It seems like it's a, by definition, very hotly debated topic, so I wanted to spend this video going into the pros and cons of whether or not this would be good, and then come up with a verdict here. I'm leaning towards it probably would not be a good idea, but let's go into it and see what we can come up with. So let's go over the pros first. Now, the first pro, and there are less pros than cons, I will spoil here. However, this first pro is such a large pro that it counts as like 4 separate points. But basically, it would be somewhere for sweaty players to go. This helps basically everybody, because if there were sweaty players that are going against casual players and they're stomping them and they're bored of that, then they would have an option to not have that anymore. The casual players would be less likely to encounter sweaty players trying to stomp them. Now, of course, you could still queue into the regular mode and it would happen, but it would be lessened at the very least. And so you'd basically be focusing all of the sweat into one particular area. In theory, that would make games more pleasant for everybody because on average, more players would be getting what they're expecting. If they play the casual mode, they'd be getting more casual play and vice versa. So in theory, that's a really good idea. If we can get to a scenario where we're actually having players encounter the types of matches that they want to encounter and not just roll the dice every time between killer and power and map and MMR and matchmaking and hours and all the random shit that goes into, deciding a match, then I think that would be overall a very good thing. So that is a very, very massive plus. I will say I feel like it's a bit optimistic to think it will work out perfectly like that, but let's just pretend it does. If it did, that would be an extremely good thing for the game and would make a lot of players far less burnt out, far less upset, because they'd be subjecting themselves to things that they would enjoy on average a bit more. So that would be very, very good. The next positive is actually there could be more accurate balancing data finally. When you are getting data from all over the place with an MMR system that makes absolutely no sense, you have this situation where the data that you're getting is basically meaningless. It doesn't, wow, Nurse is one of the worst killers in the game with such a low kill rate. I guess we need to buff the Nurse. Like, stuff like that, it just doesn't really result in accurate data. Now, what will result in accurate data is an even match and an even match. That will actually let us know who is good, who is bad, what needs to be changed. So in terms of getting actual mass data, that will be one of the few times mass data from Behaviour would actually be helpful and useful, because as it stands right now, the mass data that they usually get is borderline harmful because it's so useless, and it might even spin a web of lies that is not even indicative of what the data is even trying to represent. So that could be an issue there. But overall, I think this would lead to more accurate data, which could lead to more accurate balancing, which could lead to a more accurately balanced game. So overall, that could be pretty decent. Now, unfortunately, that's all I could come with. That's all I can come up with in terms of pros. I know it's 2, but like I said, the first one is such a massive pro that it counts as like several. But let's go into the cons now. The first and most immediate impact that would be felt would be the split queues. I don't really have to tell you, when there's an event mode, you can feel that queue times are worse. Now think about having a permanent ranked mode, and then also there's an event going on, so now we have 3 separate queues. Queue times will be abysmal. They will be so bad, and that's the kind of thing that makes people stop playing a game when it takes them 10-15 minutes to even get into a match. It would be so bad. And this is not even people that are playing in the ranked mode, people that are playing in casual. Like, it's just going to throw off the ratios of players required. Like, I feel like by definition, there would be a shortage of survivors in the ranked mode, because you would want to play 4-mans in ranked mode, but 4-mans are the vast minority of the groups that play this game. So I think there would be a weird disparity there. But for the most part, having a split queue, I think the only way this would kind of work is if it was like a limited time thing, kind of like 2v8 or anything like that. You could make it so for a couple of weeks, there is ranked mode, but then it goes away and it's not taking or stacking with another queue. That would be so bad. If we had 3 queues, the game would be like unplayable. So that would be a huge issue. But if it was like a limited time event, I could see that being not too negatively impactful on the game. And if it was, it would expire and, oh well, we learned our lesson, no big deal. So Split queues, that's an obvious massive downside. Here's another huge one. Balancing restrictions. Anyone that has played this game for a while can tell you that Dead by Daylight does not work when it is completely unrestricted. It just simply does not function properly. If you put whatever the survivors could possibly bring in versus whatever the killers could possibly bring in, on average, the survivors are going to just simply do better, even if you're bringing Nurse or Blight. If everyone's stacking Sprint Burst and, I don't know, Vigil and OTR DS or Deliverance or whatever insane comp meta perks that you want to do, the only reason these matches can function in comp matches is because all these perks are heavily limited and regulated. In this type of scenario, if there was no regulation, what you would have is 4-man Survive with friends running the exact same perks every game, going against Nurse and Blight every game at the top. That's all it would be, and I'm sorry, anyone would get bored of that. The most competitive, sweaty player alive would get bored of the same match over and over and over again, because by definition, those will be the only things on the killer side strong enough to get up there. And on the survivor side, that'll be the only thing strong enough to get up there. So we will have the same 4 perks on 4 survivors versus Nurse and Blight until the end of time. That sounds like torture. I would never, ever subject myself to doing that. So there would be no incentive for me to get high MMR there, because then that's all I would encounter. And that sounds terrible. And I'm sorry. You would need to find me someone that thinks that sounds fun. So that is if they had no balancing restrictions. Obviously, that would not work. The entire mode just simply would not function. So what do they have to do? They have to have restrictions. And the problem is, I don't trust them to do restrictions. CompDBD has kind of nailed it now after, a collective 5-6 years of refining other rule sets and trying them out in tournaments and, refining them again and trying them, refining and trying. And after a long time, we finally have a good set of rules that can make, there are matches where Ghostface can win, actually. Normally, that would be impossible in an unregulated event there, but due to specific map selections and add-ons and restrictions and things like that, it's possible Ghostface can win in a comp match now. So we would have to trust Behaviour to set these restrictions in an accurate way in order for things to be feasible to actually compete with. And that will just simply never happen. I'm sorry, you are delusional if you think that they would nail that. I don't know how many times you've heard recently that they have a consultant team, and the consultants are always pissed off that they're not listening to them. So what makes you think that they would listen to the consultants perfectly one-to-one about 500 perks and restrictions and things like that? You know the amount of work that would go into doing that? And you could say, oh, just copy some DBD League and just throw it in there. They're not going to do that. I just see no world where they just copy some rule set and then just throw it in. The way I think they would do it is probably try to do some very lazy, basic restrictions, like survivors can't bring items, or, killers can't bring add-ons or something like that. Something very basic that's not going to really fix the problem. So the real issue with this mode being functional is that unrestricted, it does not work, and restricted, Behaviour doesn't work. So I don't see an out here. I see both ways it's going to fail. There's no actual way you can make this work correctly, because Behaviour is just not good at these things, and they don't listen to their consultants enough, which means there's just going to be years and years and years of issues before they get it to a spot where it's actually playable. By that point, I feel like people will be so burnt out on it that no one's going to even give a shit about it anymore. So balance restrictions are a very, very huge flaw in this system. Next, I would say one of the major cons to this is it is kind of redundant to me. Ranked DBD would be an area for sweaty players that want to really see their limits in the game, and that's respectable. They want to stop going against babies. They want to go against much bigger competition, and they want to, get to the next level of their skill, and that's fine. The problem is they can already do that. There are DBD ranked discords right now that you can do. Kind of like it harkens back to the early days of when I played, like in 2008 or something, I played Dota, and, you didn't just do public games. You would have there was Clan TDA. It was a league with its own systems and things like that. And you would have, your own MMR based on that, and it worked. And that's how people organized it. That exists for this game right now. There is a very large ranked DBD community, and you can just hop in right now and start doing it. There's nothing stopping you. So it's almost like if you're looking to take it to the next level, why aren't you doing that? why aren't you going into the ranked Discord and going to the next level? And you can even go further than there, make an actual comp team, take it to the next level. There are plenty of avenues right now for you to take it to this next level. So go do it. Why does Behaviour have to do it for you? Like, I get it would be nice to have an in-game UI for it and things like that, and that's great, but do you really expect them to cater to that specific type of player and generate an entire new mode that will split queues and probably harm the player base when the option already exists for you? That's what I'm saying. It doesn't make any sense. You can already do it. Why would they sacrifice so much to let you do something that you can already do? So this might be a slightly inflammatory and hot take, but I also think there will be a separate side effect of this, where it's like the people that want this mode are like not quite confident enough to enter into these ranked Discords and stuff like that, but they're like in this awkward in-between here, and I think that is sort of an awkward place to be. But I actually think there will be an outcome with this where people are actually gonna get pissed off at this mode if it actually exists. Because I think people over time, like, look at any, notable killer content creator. They have, at least a 75% or higher win rate, right? That is, like, unheard of in most games. Having a 75% win rate with a functional MMR system is crazy. Top 1% insane. You are the god of the game. You are Cyril in StarCraft. Like, you are absolutely incredible at that game. But most killer content creators just have that, just casually. So what's going to happen is if you go into this mode and the matchmaking actually somehow works, is you're not going to have that win rate anymore. People going on 100, 200, 300 win streaks for killers. You're going to have to try going on a 10 win streak if it actually works. I think a lot of people are going to have their egos bruised a lot by this because they have been coddled into thinking that a 75% or 80% win rate is simply not enough, and perhaps the game is still too hard. I'm not saying this is a lot of people, but there's definitely a demographic of players that are way too comfortable with their win rate being above 80%. And this will absolutely shatter that. And I think people will be very unpleasantly surprised at how much they thought they wanted an increased challenge, but really they just kind of prefer winning because it feels good. So I do think there will be sort of ego bruising with that subset as well, but that's a little aside that, I don't know is true or not. I just have a feeling stuff like that will happen. But yeah, redundancy. I feel like because all these things are already options, that adding it to the game, having it split the player base, increase queue times, and have other negative effects is just kind of, yeah, like I said, redundant. The final con, I would say, for the mode of ranked here, I don't know why I worded it like that. I'm very tired. We've been doing lots of things the past week. Is there would be 2 balance branches forever. And what I mean by that is every time a change is made to a perk or an add-on or something like that, now whenever they're making that change in the back of their mind, they have to keep into account that there is now a ranked mode that might function differently with this. Assuming restrictions are in place, which again, they have to be for the mode to work, then they will have to design perks and changes and updates and balance fixes and stuff like that with those separate balancing branches basically in mind. Basically, in a nutshell, they will have to double their efforts in terms of balancing. So they're going to have to balance things for casual, and then they're going to have to balance things in mind for ranked mode with restrictions and, caveats for running certain builds and certain perks and comboing certain things and stuff like that. And that, to me, again, sounds like something Behaviour is completely incapable of doing. The reason is they are so slow at balancing changes that they can barely hold it together with just one branch of the game. Imagine having an entirely separate permanent branch that requires high levels of balance. Like, dude, they are not physically capable of doing that. I think when people think of a ranked mode in DBD, they think of it very idealistically. Like, in a perfect world with like Valve at the helm or something like that, then yes, I do actually think it would be a really good idea, and it would be mostly only positive effects. But with Behaviour at the helm, I don't know why people have so much faith in them to nail any of the things I just talked about. They do not have that experience to do it. And even if they listen to the right people, we have seen so many times in the past that even when they have consultants, they listen and then just kind of do other shit anyway. Like, I just have zero faith in them to nail this, and the negative ramifications to doing it, in my opinion, would grossly outweigh the benefits. Not to mention the very obvious problems like Nothing stops sweaty players from just going back into regular matches and just beating the shit out of people like normal. Not much different from how, MMR currently works, but there is nothing stopping you from doing that. And unless there was some incredible incentive for playing in the ranked mode, I just don't see it taking off. I don't see it ever being functional. I don't see it being liked past a couple of weeks as sort of a gimmick, especially if it's unrestricted. It'll get monotonous in days. Overall, I think it is just not a feasible thing for this company to do. Theoretically, yes, it could work. Can Behaviour do it? No, I don't think they can. Those are my opinions on it. I know people have very differing thoughts on this, and that's totally okay. But yeah, I think it would do more harm than good given the reality of the company that we're dealing with here. So that's it. Thanks for watching. See you next time.